Hey guys, tonight we're setting sail far back in time, and you find yourself blinking against a sun so bright it feels almost hostile. The sky above is a white-blue dome, and the sand around you stretches endlessly, a shimmering sheet of gold. There's no shade, no cool breeze, only the relentless heat pressing down. Your lips are already dry, your skin sticky with sweat. This is ancient Egypt, and you, somehow, have woken up in the middle of it. Spoiler alert, you probably won't last a single day here. The air tastes of dust, and every sound is muffled under the weight of the sun. There's the distant glimmer of the Nile, promising life if you can reach it. But right now, you're not even sure your sandals will survive the walk. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love it if you dropped a comment with where you are right now and what time it is as you're listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is how different the rhythm of this world feels. The cicadas, or whatever ancient equivalent is buzzing here, hum endlessly in the reeds, and the Nile seems to breathe with its own pulse. You don't really walk here, not at first. You shuffle, trying not to burn your soles on the sand. Every step feels like stepping onto the surface of a hot skillet. If sunscreen exists at all, it's in the form of a smeared mixture of oils and animal fat, and maybe, if you're unlucky, a touch of crocodile dung. Remember the fancy SPF bottle sitting forgotten on your nightstand back home? Yeah, that's looking pretty luxurious right about now. You cup your hand to your brow, peering toward the river. The Nile is not just water. It's the difference between surviving another day and becoming a parched cautionary tale. Without it, this land is merciless. People here time their entire lives around its floods. The annual inundation will cover the fields with a thick black silt, making crops possible. But right now, you're just a lone traveler under the blinding sun, lips beginning to crack. You'd kill for a bottle of lukewarm tap water. A boy carrying a clay jar jogs past you, the water sloshing inside. He doesn't even spare you a glance. He's used to seeing strangers stagger. You stumble after him, but he darts off, feet hardened by years of running barefoot on these roads. In this moment you realize, you are fragile here, softer than everyone else. Your stomach grumbles, not from hunger yet, but from the nervous churn that comes with knowing you don't belong. The smell of baking bread drifts faintly from mud brick houses nearby. The bread here isn't the fluffy golden loaf you pick up at a grocery store. It's coarse, gritty with sand and chaff, heavy as a stone. Bite into it too hard and you'll probably chip a molar. Dentists didn't exist in the way you're used to. If a tooth hurt, they might stuff it with honey and whisper a spell to drive out the pain. And here you are, thinking wistfully about cinnamon raisin bagels. A woman, skin bronzed and eyes lined with coal, eyes you warily from her doorway. She whispers something under her breath, probably assuming you're just another traveler gone a little mad from the heat. She goes back inside, leaving you to wobble on unsteady legs. It hits you that life here isn't romantic in the way glossy history books suggest. It's gritty, raw, and unrelenting. You brush sweat from your face, but it only makes the dust cling harder to your skin. The air smells faintly of smoke, mud, and animal dung, and somewhere in the distance, a donkey brays with the sound of a broken trumpet. A group of children dart past, laughing, each carrying little clay amulets of scarab beetles around their necks. Superstition clings to everything here. You feel it in the amulets, in the chants drifting from the temple nearby, in the way people glance at you with suspicion. The temple looms not far away, massive columns painted in colors faded by centuries of sun. It's both awe-inspiring and intimidating, a reminder that in this world, you are small. Gods watch from every wall, their eyes painted wide, staring at you as if to judge every faltering step you take. The priests here hold more power than you can imagine. They manage the harvest, the rituals, even the medicine. If you faint in this heat, don't expect a doctor to bring you in 4 drip. They'll wave incense and recite hymns over you, maybe press a poultice to your skin made from moldy bread. Ironically, that mold might actually save you. Centuries before penicillin, people here accidentally discovered that some mold stopped infections. Funny how history cheats like that. You stumble again and your head spins. The thought creeps in that this land wasn't built for someone like you. It demands toughness, feet hardened to stone, lungs adapted to the dry air, skin resistant to the scorching sun. Even the children here would probably outlast you without breaking a sweat. And yet, there's something hypnotic about it. The hum of cicadas, the rhythm of the river, the laughter of children chasing one another through narrow alleys. It's alive, in a way that almost makes you forget your suffering. For a heartbeat, you feel it, that fragile connection to a world both ancient and eternal. But then the sun presses harder, your throat tightens, and you remember. This is only the first hour of your day in ancient Egypt, and already you're not sure you'll make it to sundown. The heat doesn't let go. It clings to you like a heavy blanket, pressing down on your shoulders until even your bones feel tired. The sun here isn't just overhead. It's everywhere, bouncing off pale walls of mud brick, glaring from the sand, glaring from the Nile. There's no shade unless you duck into a doorway or crouch under a ragged palm. And even then, the air sits still and hot, like breathing inside a clay oven. You wipe your forehead, and your hand comes away gritty. Welcome to the daily reality. If you're not constantly fighting the sun, you're losing. You try to keep moving, following the distant glimmer of water. The Nile promises relief, but there's no neat little fountain to lean over, no plastic bottle you can twist open. Water here is hauled in heavy jars, filtered through reeds, and sometimes left tasting faintly of clay or algae. You imagine yourself asking for sparkling mineral water, just once, and laugh quietly. Even that laugh dries your mouth further. Somewhere ahead, a farmer stoops low in the reeds, splashing muddy water over his arms. His skin is darkened by years of exposure, his shoulders lean, sinewy. He barely glances up at you, his rhythm practiced, calm. For him, the heat isn't an obstacle. It's background noise. He's been shaped by it, hardened like the clay pots stacked behind his hut. You, meanwhile, already feel like melting wax. It's easy to forget that survival here is an art form. The people of this land have mastered small tricks. Sandals woven from papyrus reeds to lift their feet above scorching ground. Simple headcloths dipped in water. Jars buried in sand to keep liquid cool. You're just pacing, squinting, and dreaming of air conditioning. Imagine explaining that machines that blow cold air from the walls to someone here. They'd probably think you were a sorcerer. Or worse, they'd demand you summon the cool breeze on command. And when you couldn't, you'd quickly discover that patience wasn't the hallmark of ancient crowds. A sudden gust brushes your skin. It should be a relief, but it's not. It's the Khamsin wind, hot and dry, sweeping grains of sand against your cheeks like tiny stings. You pull your makeshift cloth tighter around your face. Each inhale feels like you're sipping air from a hairdryer. And yet, these winds are just part of the rhythm of life here. People expect them. Some even claim they carry omens, signs from the gods woven into dust and heat. In the distance, you notice workers trudging in long lines, balancing baskets of mud, straw, and stone. Their backs glisten with sweat, but they walk with steady purpose. These are not the pyramid builders of glossy imagination. They're ordinary villagers, pressed into labor for the season, building canals to trap and guide the Nile's floodwaters. Because here, survival isn't just about today. It's about anticipating the river's moods. When the river rises, the floodplain becomes a mirror of the sky. Dark water spread wide, swallowing fields and paths. It's both terrifying and life-saving. Too much water, and villages drown. Too little, and famine follows. The gods themselves, people say, control this delicate balance. Priests study the river, measure it with nilometers carved into stone, and predict what kind of year awaits. Crops, taxes, even your next meal depends on their readings. And here you are, looking at the river like it's a salvation and not realizing it's also a threat. Your body reminds you how fragile you are. Sweat trickles down your spine, and your vision swims at the edges. A child rushes past, holding a clay cup brimming with water. You nearly snatch it from him, but you stop yourself. The boy's mother watches with sharp eyes from a doorway. Instead, you wave weakly, as if you're perfectly fine. The boy giggles and keeps running. You finally reach the riverbank. The Nile stretches endlessly, its surface flashing silver under the merciless sun. People wade at the edges, splashing water on their arms, washing clothes, leading animals in for a drink. The air here is thick with wet reeds, fish, and the sour tang of mud. You crouch low, scoop up water in your cupped hands, and drink. It tastes earthy, a little sour, but right now it's nectar. You gulp too quickly and choke, sputtering while a fisherman nearby chuckles at your clumsiness. The fisherman leans over, his face lined by years under the sun. "Not from here," he mutters, amused. He gestures toward the river, mimicking a slower motion. Sip, not gulp. You nod sheepishly. He shrugs and returns to mending his net. For him, the Nile is an old friend. For you, it's a gamble, life-saving today, but tomorrow it might gift you a parasite you never heard of. The locals, of course, have their ways of coping. But you just get sick, probably faster than you expect. As you sit there, cooling your wrists in the river, a group of priests pass on a nearby road, their white linen spotless despite the dust. They murmur prayers to Happy, the god of the Nile, carrying offerings in woven baskets. You realize this isn't just water, it's divinity. Every drop belongs to the gods before it belongs to you. The farmer, the fisherman, even the boy with the clay cup, they all live within this delicate pact of reverence and fear. Your tongue feels a little less like sandpaper now, but the truth hasn't changed. The sun dominates everything. It decides your labor, your meals, your lifespan. No sunscreen, no parasol, no quick escape indoors. Just you and the endless, blistering brilliance. And with that, your second hour in ancient Egypt begins. You're alive, yes, but only barely. The Nile glitters like a silver serpent, winding endlessly through the desert. You sit by its edge a while longer, feeling your pulse steady as the cool water trickles across your wrists. But soon, the hum of voices, the sound of donkeys braying, and the rhythmic slap of wet laundry remind you, this river isn't just scenery. It's the heartbeat of everything around you. You stand, brushing mud from your legs, and you start to notice a pattern. Life here moves with the river's rhythm, not your own. In your world, time ticks by in neat numbers glowing from a screen. Here, time sways. It rises and falls, tethered to the Nile's moods. People don't measure life in hours or minutes, but in floods, sowings, and harvests. Right now, farmers kneel in fields along the water, scattering seeds onto wet earth, their gestures steady, practiced. They sing as they work, a low chant rising with the wind. The sound is hypnotic, like waves rolling against a shore. A man notices you standing awkwardly and waves you closer. His tunic is simple linen, sweat darkening the fabric at his chest. He presses a handful of emmer seeds into your palm, nodding toward the field. You hesitate, what do you even do with this? But he demonstrates, tossing his hand wide, the seeds scattering like tiny sparks. You mimic him, clumsy at first, then again, until your hands find a small rhythm. The soil clings to your toes, warm and squishy between them, and you realize you're literally standing in the lifeblood of Egypt. The floodplain is generous now, but you've already heard whispers. When the Nile fails, famine follows. Whole villages wither. Priests and officials scurry to assign blame. Was it the pharaoh displeased? Were the gods angry? Or simply, as some quiet voices suggest, was it just nature being cruel? Some historians still argue over whether climate shifts contributed to the collapse of Old Kingdom dynasties. It's strange to think about, the rise and fall of empires tied to whether or not the river swelled high enough. You squat low, watching a group of boys herd ducks into a pen near the shore. The ducks squawk indignantly, wings flapping, while the boys laugh and push them along. Beside them, a woman pats mud into bricks, stacking them carefully to dry under the sun. Everything feels temporary here. Houses of clay, baskets of reeds, sandals of papyrus. And yet, through repetition, through sheer persistence, it endures. There's a superstition woven into all this work. Before planting, some farmers mutter prayers to Osiris, the god tied to crops and rebirth. A quick glance around shows small clay figurines pressed into the soil, offerings to keep the land fertile. You crouch to examine one, and a child immediately snatches it back, glaring. To them, this isn't just decoration, it's protection. Touching it feels like tempting bad luck. You mumble an apology you're not sure they understand, and shuffle back. The air here carries layers of smells. Damp soil, the faint sweetness of reeds, and the sharp tang of animal dung. It's not exactly the kind of fresh earth scent a candle company would sell, though you can almost imagine it being marketed as Nile breeze if it were bottled today. You grin to yourself, wiping sweat from your forehead. As the sun arcs higher, you realize how much of daily life is tethered to the flood cycle. Calendars aren't printed sheets, they're carved into memory. The season of flooding, the season of planting, the season of harvest. This is the clock by which everyone lives. Miss one and you're lost. Nearby, an old man with a papyrus scroll sits on a low stool, watching the fields. He marks something down with a reed pen, his movements deliberate. You realize he isn't farming, he's recording, probably tallying yields for taxes or tracking which families owe grain to the temple. Knowledge itself here is power, and while you're fumbling with seeds, he's quietly shaping the fate of entire households with his brushstrokes. A donkey brays again, startling you. You nearly stumble into a patch of reeds, where a fisherman crouches silently, waiting with a net. He glares at you, hisses through his teeth, then gestures for silence. Seconds later, he flings the net, pulling up wriggling fish that slap against the wet earth. His grin is wide, victorious. Tonight his family will eat more than bread and beer. You realize that a single good catch can feel like winning the lottery. You look out over the water again, and a strange calm washes over you. The Nile is more than survival. It's rhythm, ritual, reassurance. Its rise and fall cradles life, dictates it, and demands respect. And right now, under the relentless sun, you're just beginning to sense how fragile and yet how eternal this balance is. Still, a bead of sweat runs down your back, and your throat is scratchy again. You know one thing for certain. However graceful the locals make it seem, this cycle isn't built for you. And as the shadows of palm trees stretch just slightly longer, your third hour in ancient Egypt ticks away, measured not in minutes, but in the steady, endless breathing of the river. Your stomach growls again, louder this time, like it's staging a protest. You wipe dust from your lips and realize you can't keep going on river water alone. If you want to survive even a few more hours here, you need food. Luckily or unluckily, depending on how picky you are, you've stumbled into one of the busiest rhythms of the Nile world, the daily bread. You shuffle toward a courtyard where women crouch around low clay ovens, the heat rolling off them in waves. Your first thought, more fire? Seriously, as if the sun weren't enough, these ovens add an extra blast of furnace air to the mix. The women work quickly, kneading dark dough, slapping it into flat rounds, sliding them against the oven walls. The smell is rich, nutty, faintly sour. You inhale deeply, your first genuine whiff of comfort here. But when you bite into a piece offered to you, the illusion cracks. Literally. The bread is rough, dense, and grinds against your teeth like sandpaper. You chew cautiously, half expecting to break a molar. And here's the funny part, you actually might. Archaeologists have found ancient skulls with teeth worn down to the gums, thanks to bread laced with bits of sand and grit from grinding stones. You, a pampered visitor from the future, suddenly long for a soft bagel. Still, this bread is life. Everyone eats it, morning and night, often dipped in oil or lentil stew. Beer washes it down. A cloudy, porridge-like drink that tastes sour but fills the stomach. Someone hands you a clay cup, and you sip. It's thick, almost chewy, with floating bits of grain. Not exactly the crisp lager in your fridge at home, but it does the trick. You burp softly, earning a laugh from the kids nearby. Apparently, even here, bodily noises are comedy gold. You wipe foam from your lips and notice the variety of food scattered around. Fish drying on racks, onions bundled in baskets, dates sticky with sweetness. It's not a feast, but it's fuel. And fuel is everything when you're hauling stones, plowing fields, or just trying to keep your body from collapsing under the sun. As you watch, a woman tosses herbs into a pot, the scent sharp and earthy. Coriander, perhaps. Ancient Egyptians loved seasoning, though not in the way you think of a spice rack today. Garlic, leeks, cumin, and coriander gave their simple meals a bite. You imagine explaining sriracha sauce to her. She'd probably nod politely, then hand you a clove of garlic and say, "Same thing. Not all meals are equal here, of course. The wealthy dine on beef, lamb, or roasted goose. You, unless you've somehow married into royalty in the last 2 hours, you're sticking with bread, onions, and beer. Still, every once in a while, a festival might roll through, and ordinary villagers get a taste of luxury. Roasted fish, figs dripping with honey, even a bit of meat. For now, though, the feast in front of you is coarse bread and gritty beer, and your stomach is thankful anyway. One old man notices you struggling with your tough loaf and chuckles. His teeth are worn to stubs, but he doesn't complain. He tells you, in a mix of gestures and words you half understand, that chewing bread here isn't just eating. It's training. By the time you're his age, your jaw will be strong enough to crack walnuts bare. You smile weakly, not sure you'll last long enough for such training. The children nearby snack on something you can't quite identify. You edge closer and realize it's dried figs, shriveled but sweet. They offer you one, giggling when the sticky sugar coats your fingers. You lick it off, and for a moment you're back home, tasting a granola bar. The human need for sugar is timeless. But beneath the laughter, a shadow lingers. People here know famine too well. One failed flood, one unlucky season, and this table of bread, onions, and beer disappears. Some years, desperation drove families to grind wild papyrus roots into paste just to fill their bellies. You think back to your fridge, overstocked, humming quietly at home, and feel a pang of guilt. Here, nothing is guaranteed. As the meal winds down, a woman gathers scraps of bread for her goats, nothing wasted. You brush crumbs from your lap, realizing this bread, gritty and hard as it is, has kept millions alive for millennia. It may not taste like much, but it's the reason temples rise, armies march, and children grow strong enough to laugh at strangers like you. And as the smell of smoke and bread clings to your hair, your stomach finally quiets, at least for now. But you know this truth. If the Nile falters, if the bread disappears, so do you. Your fourth hour in ancient Egypt closes with a mouthful of grit and a belly that, for the moment, feels just a little safer. You lean back against a mud brick wall, still chewing the last stubborn bits of that gritty bread, when a smell drifts past that makes your stomach tighten again. It's not the earthy scent of onions or the sour heaviness of beer. No, this is richer, sharper, alive with fat crackling and smoke curling in the air. You lift your head like a dog catching a whiff of barbecue. Somewhere close, someone is cooking something rare, meat. You follow the scent down a narrow alley where a small group has gathered. A man squats beside a clay hearth, turning skewers of fish over glowing coals. The skin blisters, popping with oil, and a thin trail of smoke spirals upward. You can almost hear your taste buds applauding. This isn't your everyday diet in Egypt. This is a prize. Fish are abundant, yes, but roasting them like this, with precious wood for fuel and enough time to sit and wait, is something only a lucky family gets to enjoy. One woman, her hands quick and practiced, stuffs a bird with herbs. Not just any bird, a goose. The scent is wild, gamey, a far cry from your supermarket poultry wrapped in plastic. She rubs the skin with oil, probably sesame or castor, then ties the legs neatly with a strip of linen. You realize you're watching the makings of a feast, not the scraps of survival. It strikes you that food here is layered like society itself. At the top, nobles feast on beef, lamb, goose, honey cakes. In the middle, families like the one you're spying on enjoy fish when they can, a goose perhaps for a festival. And at the bottom, well, you've already chewed their bread. Even here, your place at the table tells the story of who you are. The fisherman from earlier notices you hovering, grins, and tears off a charred chunk of fish to hand you. You take it eagerly, ignoring the heat that scorches your fingertips. The flesh flakes away, smoky, salty, and far more delicious than anything you've eaten since waking in this world. You close your eyes, savoring it, and for a second you forget the sun, the grit, the endless dryness. This is joy, but joy, like meat, is rationed here. Most people live their lives on bread and beer, with vegetables filling in when they're lucky. Meat is rare, almost sacred. Sometimes it's reserved for offerings to the gods, burned on altars where the smoke curls skyward as if feeding divinity itself. What remains, if anything, feeds the priests. Ordinary villagers, they wait, they watch, and they pray for festival days when temple generosity spills over into the streets. A young boy beside you munches on roasted duck, his lips slick with fat. He laughs when you try to imitate his quick method of tearing the skin off, then wipes grease across his linen tunic without a care. His mother scolds him, but not too harshly. It's a festival mood. You realize that here, even the act of eating is communal. There's no sitting alone in silence with earbuds and a plate. Here, meals are noise, laughter, hands grabbing, fire crackling. And the spices, though few, are treasures. Someone sprinkles coriander over the goose, and the sharp, citrusy aroma makes your nose twitch. Another tosses garlic into the fire, filling the air with a pungent sweetness. It's not the spice cabinet of your kitchen at home, but it's enough to transform simple food into something special. Ancient Egyptians prized flavor just as much as nourishment. Still, not everything is idyllic. Out of the corner of your eye, You notice a man pulling tiny bones from between his teeth, grimacing. Even the richest meals here carry dangers. Spoiled fish, undercooked meat, foodborne illness. Without refrigeration, everything turns fast. And yet, people keep eating, keep celebrating. Because what else can you do in a land where tomorrow might bring famine? You lick your fingers clean and lean back, listening to the chatter around you. For the first time since arriving here, you almost feel human again. The bread was survival. This is life. Rare, fleeting, but oh so good. Historians still debate just how common feasts like this were outside of elite households. Some argue that ordinary farmers lived almost entirely on bread and beer, with fish as an occasional supplement. Others suggest there was more variety, more access to duck, goose, even beef during temple festivals. The truth probably shifts like the river itself, depending on where you stood in the social order. But for you, right now, it doesn't matter. You've tasted fish charred over fire, breathed in the scent of goose roasting, and for the briefest of moments, you belong. Then, of course, your stomach gurgles again, reminding you of one unfortunate truth. Your fragile modern body is probably about to find out how ancient digestion handles river fish. And suddenly, the feast feels more like a gamble. Still, as you sit there with grease on your lips and smoke in your hair, you know this. You've survived another hour in Egypt. Not well, not gracefully, but with a belly that, for now, feels alive. The smell of roasted goose still clings to your hair as you step back into the sunlight, but now something else catches your eye. A group of women sits in a shaded corner near a wall, linen garments fluttering like sails in the dry breeze. Their voices rise and fall in laughter as they grind something in small stone bowls. You lean closer and realize, this isn't food. This is fashion, or more precisely, survival disguised as style. Linen is everywhere. Thin, airy, light against the skin. It's the only fabric that makes sense here. Forget your cotton t-shirt or polyester workout gear. Linen breathes, wicks, and whispers against sweaty skin. But don't picture runway elegance. Most people wear simple tunics, off-white or light beige, belted at the waist. The wealthy, though, their linen glows like moonlight, so finely woven it's nearly transparent. You spot a man strutting by, his robe sheer enough to make you blush. Fashion here is subtle, but it's definitely a statement. You're handed a strip of linen yourself, and when you drape it over your shoulders, the relief is immediate. The fabric is cool at first, though it quickly warms, soaking your sweat. Still, compared to the furnace of bare skin under the sun, it's heavenly. A boy nearby laughs at your clumsy attempt to tie it properly, his own tunic crisp and neat despite being patched a dozen times. He pulls your knot apart and reties it with quick fingers, like he's dressing a doll. Then comes the cosmetics. You think of cosmetics as vanity, but here they're medicine. One woman dips a reed stick into a small jar and drags thick black coal along her eyelids. The effect is striking, her eyes sharp, defined, almost godlike. But it's not just for beauty. The coal protects against glare, the way athletes smear black grease under their eyes today. It also wards off infection. At least that's what people believe. Some historians say the lead compounds in coal might actually have stimulated the immune system, which means their superstition had some science behind it. Funny how often that happens in the ancient world. A young girl offers you her reed stick. You hesitate, then drag it shakily under your eye. The line smudges, uneven, more sleep-deprived panda than regal Egyptian. The women giggle, one clapping her hands in delight at your awkwardness. Still, when you blink, you realize the glare truly does ease, just a little. You almost feel cool. And then there's the perfume. Tiny alabaster jars are passed around, their stoppers sticky with resin. The scent that rises is strong, musky, sweet with hints of frankincense. You dab some on your wrist, and the heat releases it in waves, wrapping you in a cloud. It's intoxicating, almost dizzying. You catch yourself thinking, if deodorant companies sold this, it would cost a fortune. Here, though, it's both luxury and necessity. The desert doesn't forgive body odor easily. But the strangest cosmetic of all is offered next. A small jar is pushed into your hands, the contents thick, pasty, and slightly rancid smelling. You wrinkle your nose. A woman demonstrates by smearing it along her arms, then miming the hot sun overhead. It dawns on you, sunscreen, except not Coppertone SPF 50. This is a mix of oils, minerals, maybe even crocodile dung. You glance at her glistening skin, then at your already reddening arms. You sigh, scoop some out, and smear it on. It's greasy, gritty, and smells faintly like fish left too long in the sun. Congratulations, you're now coated in ancient SPF. You'll still burn, but at least you'll smell historic. Laughter bubbles around you as you struggle not to gag at the scent. One man strolls by, his head freshly shaved, scalp shiny with oil. Shaving was common here, practical for the heat and symbolic of cleanliness. Wigs, scented and styled, crown the wealthy. You imagine balancing a heavy wig in this weather and silently thank the universe for baseball caps. The truth seeps in as you watch them. Clothing and cosmetics here aren't just vanity. They're armor. Against the sun, against disease, against the desert itself. Without them, you'd already be a pile of blistered, half-melted regret on the sand. As you wipe oily hands on your linen, you glance down at your reflection in a shard of polished bronze. Your eyes are rimmed in uneven kohl. Your skin glistens with strange paste, your tunic tied haphazardly. You look ridiculous, but oddly, you also look like you belong. The women smile, pleased with their handiwork, as if they've adopted you into their strange, sun-baked beauty circle. And for a moment, under their amused eyes, you feel less like a lost traveler and more like someone trying, however poorly, to live here. Still, the smell of crocodile sunscreen lingers, and you're pretty sure that no matter how glamorous the eyeliner, you're one sweat-soaked stumble away from fainting again. Your 6th hour in ancient Egypt passes in coal-smudged laughter, with the faintest delusion of style, if you can call fishy sunscreen chic a style. The laughter of the women fades as you wander toward the edge of a bustling street. The linen clings to your skin, already damp again, and your smudged coal itches the corner of your eye. A donkey brays, a child darts past, and suddenly the rhythm of the city takes over. You realize most people aren't lounging, painting each other with oils and perfumes. Most are working, and now, somehow, you're expected to join them. The first thing you notice is the sound. A steady thunk, scrape, grunt that rolls through the air like a drumbeat. Men bend their backs beneath massive baskets filled with mud bricks, their shoulders slick with sweat. Women squat by the river, pounding laundry against smooth stones, water splashing up to soak their tunics. Children run errands, carrying jars nearly as tall as themselves. Everyone, no matter their size, seems pressed into duty. You, on the other hand, stand there like an awkward tourist at a gym you didn't sign up for. Someone shoves a basket into your hands. It's filled with reeds cut for papyrus making, their sharp ends scratching your arms. You stumble forward, nearly tipping the whole load onto the ground. The man beside you chuckles, dry, raspy, but not unkind. He motions you toward a shaded spot where others are laying reeds flat, pounding them until the fibers release sticky juice. You kneel and try, but after 3 strikes your arms are shaking. They pound hundreds in a day. You can barely manage 3. Sweat drips into your eyes, stinging against the coal. You rub your face with your forearm, leaving a streaky, black smear across your cheek. The woman beside you grins. shaking her head as if to say, "Rookie." She slaps a reed against the stone with such force that the fibers split instantly. You mimic her, and instead of splitting, the reed whips back and smacks your hand. The sting is sharp. You yelp. She laughs harder. It's not just the papyrus makers. Out by the fields, farmers stoop under the sun, their feet caked in mud, their hands calloused from pulling stubborn weeds. They sing to keep rhythm, low chants that rise and fall with the stroke of their sickles. You try joining in, your voice cracking awkwardly on the foreign notes. The farmer beside you grins, then deliberately sings louder, drowning you out like a karaoke veteran who refuses to let you have a verse. By mid-morning, your back aches, your arms tremble, and your neck burns. Modern desk work suddenly feels like a spa day by comparison. You think of ergonomic chairs, coffee breaks, and air conditioning, and nearly cry with longing. Here, the only coffee break is taking a sip from a clay jar of lukewarm river water, gritty with silt. And yet, beneath the misery, there's something mesmerizing about the rhythm. The repetitive scrape of sickle against stalk, the slap of laundry against stone, the pounding of reeds into sheets. It all weaves together into a strange, ancient orchestra. The sound becomes hypnotic, like the hum of a fan you left running while you drift to sleep. But the toll on your body is undeniable. Your hands blister. Your skin feels like it's being roasted alive. The linen sticks to you in patches, like wet paper plastered on a sweaty soda can. At one point, you bend to lift a jar and feel your spine complain with a sharp, unfriendly jolt. You mutter something modern under your breath, probably not words the Egyptians used. Still, you push through. The workers around you don't stop. They can't. Work here isn't optional. It's survival. Bread must be baked. Fields must be watered. Bricks must be molded. If you falter, someone else picks up the slack. If no one does, the Nile doesn't forgive. There's an odd fact lurking here. Even though the work is brutal, Egyptians weren't mindless machines. Archaeologists have found records of strikes, yes, strikes thousands of years before modern labor unions. Workers demanded fair rations, more beer, better treatment. Some things, it seems, never change. You wonder if, after your pitiful attempts today, you'd be the first to join their picket line. Your stomach growls, reminding you that food and rest are still far away. The man with the rasping chuckle pats your shoulder, a gesture that's both sympathetic and amused. You've survived a morning's labor, and you're already half broken. He's been doing it his whole life. As the sun climbs higher, the work doesn't stop. Neither do the blisters or the aches or the creeping thought in your mind. I'm not built for this. Your 7th hour in ancient Egypt ends with your body sore, your pride bruised, and your respect for ancient laborers climbing higher than the pyramids themselves. Your arms still quiver from the reed pounding, your back hums with that dull, persistent ache, and then, like a miracle, the smell of baking bread drifts into the air. You follow your nose as if enchanted, stumbling past workers still bent over their tasks until you reach a shaded corner where women crouch near clay ovens. The heat radiates outward in shimmering waves, almost unbearable to stand too close, but the scent is irresistible. The bread doesn't look like the fluffy loaves you know today. Instead, it's squat, rough, shaped more like bricks than buns. Grains of barley and emmer wheat poke through the surface, flecked with bits of husk that make the texture coarse. You think about sliced white bread in a plastic bag, soft as a pillow, and you almost laugh because this is more like chewing gravel mixed with sawdust. But when you're starving, it smells like paradise. A woman thrusts a piece into your hand, hot enough to burn your fingers. You juggle it from palm to palm, then take a bite. The crust scrapes your gums, the inside dense and chewy, and you crunch down on something that definitely isn't flour. A tiny pebble? Maybe. It dawns on you. The grinding stones they use shed grit into the dough, and everyone ends up with teeth worn down by middle age. Dentists, centuries later, can spot Egyptian skeletons instantly. Flat teeth ground to the root from years of stone-seasoned bread. You wince and mutter, "Guess floss wasn't a thing yet." Alongside the bread comes a bowl of lentil stew, thick and earthy, flavored with onions and garlic. The taste is sharp, pungent enough to stay with you for hours. Someone hands you a jug of beer. Not the golden, crisp kind you might order at a modern bar, but cloudy, chunky, almost chewable. Bits of grain float to the surface. You sip cautiously, expecting bitterness, but it's surprisingly sweet and sour at once. More like liquid bread than drink. After 2 gulps, warmth spreads through you. Not enough alcohol to stumble, just enough to soften the edges of your exhaustion. Around you, workers sit in circles, tearing bread, dipping it into stew, laughing between mouthfuls. Children slurp beer as casually as water. It's safer than river water after all, and no one bats an eye. You nearly choke at the thought of handing a toddler a frothy mug in the present day. Here it's normal. One man waves his hunk of bread in the air, telling a story that makes everyone roar with laughter. You can't understand all the words, but the tone is unmistakable. He's exaggerating, acting out some ridiculous misstep. The kind of story you'd tell after work, except instead of, "My boss sent me 47 emails," it's, "I tripped in the irrigation ditch again." The stew fills you, the bread weighs heavy in your stomach, and the beer leaves a fizzy buzz on your tongue. For the first time today, you feel almost human again. Almost. Then you glance at your teeth in a polished bronze dish and imagine them crumbling like chalk after a lifetime of grit-filled meals. Suddenly, dessert doesn't sound so appealing. Still, there are rare treats. Someone passes a fig your way, sweet, sticky, bursting with seeds that crunch softly as you chew. Dates, honey, even a handful of pomegranate seeds find their way into the feast. You savor them greedily, marveling at the taste of sugar not from a packet, but from the sun itself. There's something strangely communal here. No one eats alone. Meals are noisy, full of chatter, a brief oasis in the relentless tide of labor. You realize that for all its flaws, ancient Egypt knows how to turn necessity into ritual. Even the grit, even the garlic breath, it binds everyone together. Historians still debate whether beer or bread was more important in daily life. Both sustained the people, fueled the labor, built the monuments. Without them, Egypt as you see it wouldn't exist. You toy with the idea that you might survive here if you could just sit, eat figs, and drink beer forever. But then you remember your blistered hands and aching spine. Yet not so likely. As the meal ends, the workers stand, stretch, and shuffle back to their endless duties. You lick the last smear of lentil from your thumb, brush crumbs from your lap, and rise reluctantly. The temporary comfort fades, and the harsh sun waits for you again. You wish the warmth of bread and beer could linger, but the moment you step away from the circle, reality smacks you in the face. Literally, with a smell so pungent it makes your eyes water. Forget the aroma of garlic stew. This is something far less romantic. You've stumbled into the realm of Egyptian sanitation, or rather, the lack thereof. Picture this. No sewage system, no pipes hidden under neat sidewalks, no sparkling restrooms with motion sensor faucets. Instead, you find pits dug near houses, chambers tucked into corners, and the occasional pot discreetly emptied straight into the street. And the street doesn't politely whisk it away. It sits, it stews. Under the heat of the Egyptian sun, it bakes into an invisible miasma. You breathe it in and gag. Suddenly, that gritty bread seems like a gourmet dinner at a 5-star restaurant. You walk along a narrow alley where wastewater from homes has been casually poured out, mixing with bits of fish bones, discarded bread crusts, and, yes, human waste. Flies buzz in triumphant clouds. Dogs scavenge through the muck, tails wagging, totally unbothered. A goat trots by, nibbling on something you pray is just wilted cabbage. You glance down and realize you've stepped into a puddle of questionable origin. Ancient Egyptian sandals? Zero splash protection. People go about their business as though the smell doesn't exist. They chat, barter, laugh while you're trying not to retch. You pass by a public latrine, essentially a bench with holes, sometimes shared, sometimes private depending on your luck. Straw or sand lines the bottom, and someone eventually will carry it off and dump it into a field. If you're lucky, you don't slip. If you're unlucky, well, let's just say Egyptian Laundry Day becomes very relevant. It dawns on you that sanitation isn't just gross, it's dangerous. Water fetched from the Nile isn't exactly filtered. People drink, bathe, wash clothes, and toss refuse all in the same river. It's no wonder diseases spread quickly, and doctors, more like priests with ointments, had plenty of work. You think about your modern obsession with hand sanitizer and laugh. If you carried a bottle here, you'd guard it like treasure. And yet, for all the filth, there's ingenuity. Egyptians used natron, that chalky mineral salt, to scrub their bodies and freshen up. Some even wore cones of perfumed wax on their heads at parties, slowly melting to release fragrance that masked, well, all this. You catch a whiff of one merchant brushing scented oil through his hair, and for a brief moment it cuts through the stench. But only for a moment. Then a donkey passes by, reminding you where you are. Some scholars argue sanitation was more organized in temple complexes and wealthier estates, where drains and basins offered a semblance of order. Others insist daily life in cities remained chaotic, filled with odors we can barely imagine. Archaeologists still debate whether certain pits were trash heaps, latrines, or both. Honestly, standing here with your sandals caked in mystery sludge, you feel the debate is moot. It's all awful. As evening creeps closer, the smell settles into your clothes, into your skin. You try to shake it off, but it clings like a bad decision. People around you don't mind, they've lived in it all their lives. But you, coming from a world of air fresheners and flushing toilets, feel like you're walking through a nightmare-scented candle labeled, "Ode to Nile Backstreet." You sigh. If you thought you wouldn't last long in the blazing sun, this convinces you you wouldn't even last a day. The stink still lingers in your nose when the next horror creeps into focus. Not just what you step in, but what you carry inside. Your stomach churns, and suddenly you realize, in ancient Egypt, sickness lurks everywhere, waiting to pounce. The Nile may have been the giver of life, but it's also a soup of parasites, microbes, and mysteries no one could see. You squat by the riverbank to splash water on your face and immediately regret it. You can almost hear your immune system waving a tiny white flag. By nightfall, someone in the neighborhood is coughing hard enough to shake the mud brick walls. Another clutches their stomach, doubled over, while their family smears honey mixed with herbs on the skin as if that could fix what's rotting inside. Honey, to be fair, does have antiseptic qualities. But when it comes to dysentery or bilharzia from snails in the Nile, a spoonful of sweetness won't save you. Egyptian medicine was a strange mix of brilliance and bewilderment. You see scribes carefully copying long papyrus scrolls filled with remedies, some recognizable, others absurd. For constipation, figs and dates. Logical. For a toothache, a mouse roasted, ground, and applied as a poultice. Less logical. For fertility, a woman might squat over a mixture of onions and crocodile dung. Let's not even unpack that. And for serious wounds, doctors often called upon spells as much as scalpels. Healing meant balancing both the physical and the spiritual. Priests serving in temple clinics had jars upon jars of ointments, oils and minerals, natron for drying wounds, frankincense smoke to ward off bad spirits. Beer, yes, as a medicine, it soothed pain and doubled as disinfectant. But when the fever ran high or the belly swelled, their best tools often fell short. You glance at a healer painting protective eyes of Horus onto strips of linen, wrapping them around a patient's arm like a charm bracelet. It's touching, almost beautiful, until you remember your fever isn't likely impressed by hieroglyphs. And then there are the plagues. Rats dart around granaries, fleas hitch rides, and illnesses sweep through communities in waves. No one really knows why some die and others survive, so the explanation defaults to gods angry or demons invading. You overhear whispers of Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war and plague, prowling invisibly through the streets. Offerings pile up in front of her statues. Bowls of beer, hunks of bread, desperate prayers. What strikes you most is how ordinary all this is to the people around you. They carry amulets carved into tiny beetles, convinced these scarabs can keep disease away. They trust in dreams as diagnoses, priests as doctors, and river water as cleanser, never doubting that a sip might carry death. Meanwhile, you're thinking about your modern allergy pills, your antibiotics, even your mundane cough syrup. Here, without them, a sore throat could spiral into disaster. Scholars still debate just how advanced Egyptian surgery was. Some point to skulls showing signs of trepanation, holes drilled, patients surviving. Others argue most operations were more symbolic than effective. What's clear is that they understood anatomy through mummification, yet rarely used that knowledge in everyday healing. Imagine knowing exactly where the liver is, but treating jaundice with crushed lettuce seeds and a hymn. You lie down on a mat in a simple home, but sleep doesn't come easy. Someone nearby wheezes through the night, another groans, and you realize that illness was a constant companion in this world. No clean hospitals, no painkillers beyond opium mixed in beer, no understanding of bacteria, just hope, prayer, and enough resilience to keep going. And as you finally drift off, you're sure of one thing. If the sun and the stink didn't get you, the sickness surely would. You wake before dawn, still sore from yesterday's chaos, and now you're swept into the rhythm of work that never ends. Forget alarm clocks, the Nile itself is your boss. The rising sun paints the mud with gold, but you're too tired to notice. A village elder shouts, and suddenly you're in line with dozens of others, a hoe in hand, marching toward the fields. If you thought commuting traffic today was bad, try walking barefoot through sticky black silt that grips your ankles like quicksand. Life as a peasant here is one long dance with the river. When it floods, you rejoice. When it fails, you starve. The earth is rich, yes, but it demands backbreaking devotion. You bend, plant, bend again. Wheat, barley, flax, they all sprout only because hundreds of hands like yours never stop moving. And don't even think about a water bottle break. Your refreshment comes from a goatskin bag slung across someone's shoulder, the liquid inside tasting suspiciously like yesterday's sandals. The tools? Simple wooden plows, sometimes tipped with bronze if you're lucky, but mostly dull and splintering. Farmers guide oxen as if those animals are coworkers, only coworkers that might decide to bolt when startled by a bird. The sun climbs higher, heat shimmering across the fields, sweat dripping into your eyes. You try to wipe it away, but your hands are caked in muck. Congratulations, you've invented mud mascara. What's worse, this isn't optional. Taxes are collected not in coins, but in grain, so every seed you plant feels like it already belongs to someone else. Royal scribes stand nearby, tallying everything. Their reed pens scratch against papyrus as they record quotas you'll never meet. You can practically hear your future debt being inked line by line. Miss the numbers, and officials won't hesitate to seize your cattle or even your family members for labor. And don't assume the work ends when the sun dips. After harvest, you haul bundles of stalks back to storage, thresh grain with flails, and grind flour on heavy stones until your shoulders burn. Your hands blister, calluses tear, but you keep moving because hunger is always waiting at the door. There's no weekend, no holiday unless it's a festival decreed by the gods. You'd pray for rain, but then you remember you're already standing in the gift and curse of the Nile. Still, the peasants find small joys. Children splash in irrigation canals, women sing rhythmic songs while weaving baskets, and someone always has a joke about scribes being too soft to survive a single day in the fields. You laugh weakly, even though you secretly envy those ink-stained fingers. Archaeologists debate whether peasants were happy under pharaonic rule. Some argue the steady flood cycle brought security, while others highlight skeletal remains showing arthritis, malnutrition, and endless stress fractures. Judging from your aching back and sunburnt neck, you're leaning toward the second camp. By nightfall, you collapse on a reed mat, your body humming like a broken machine. Above you, stars stretch across the desert sky, but you're too exhausted to care. Your last thought before sleep? That tomorrow the Nile will call again, and you'll have no choice but to answer. You might have thought yesterday's farming ordeal was the worst of it. But no, ancient Egypt has another surprise lined up. Just when your body starts to adjust to the endless bending and hauling, a royal messenger arrives. His shaved head gleams in the sun. His voice rings sharp as a bronze cymbal. The pharaoh requires your labor. Suddenly, your life is no longer about tending your tiny patch of earth. You've been drafted into corvée service, the state's rotating labor tax. Congratulations, you're now government property. You march alongside hundreds of villagers, leaving behind your family, trudging toward projects that make your jaw drop. A massive canal is being dug to extend irrigation. Another team is hauling colossal limestone blocks for a temple. And yes, those legendary pyramids, they weren't built in a week. Ordinary men like you poured their sweat into every crevice. Forget the myths about slaves in chains. Most of the workforce were peasants pressed into duty, repaid with bread, beer, and the hope their families wouldn't starve while they were gone. Your daily reality here is punishing. You wake at dawn to the bark of overseers, who wield long staffs not just for show. You drag sledges across ramps greased with water or animal fat, your bare feet slipping on hot stone. Each pull strains your shoulders, rope burns your palms, your breath comes in ragged gasps. The sound of 100 voices chanting helps keep rhythm, but also reminds you, none of you are free to stop. Meals? A round of coarse bread stuffed with grit, enough to wear down your teeth like sandpaper, and a jug of sour beer thick enough to chew. It fills the belly but not the spirit. At night, you huddle in workers' huts made of mud brick, lying shoulder to shoulder on straw mats. Sleep doesn't erase the pain, it just postpones it. And yet, amid the misery, there's strange pride. When you glance back at the rising monument, you realize you're part of something colossal, something meant to last forever. Your name won't be carved on its walls, but your fingerprints are there, hidden beneath the stone. That thought almost warms you, until another overseer screams for the team to move faster. Sometimes you notice the officials who supervise everything. Their white linen gleams clean, untouched by dust, as they stand under parasols fanning themselves. They carry scrolls to record quotas. How many stones were moved, how many ditches dug, how many men collapsed. To them, you're not a person, you're a number. Historians still debate whether this corvée labor was fair exchange for protection and food, or whether it was thinly disguised exploitation. Whatever the truth, your back says it all. And your heart clenches when you realize, if you don't survive this assignment, your family may never see you again. As you stumble toward your straw mat at the end of another grueling day, you realize the cruelest part isn't the labor. It's the knowledge that tomorrow, and the day after, the work will be just as relentless. You close your eyes, imagining a world where people complain about office jobs, and you almost laugh. Almost. You don't even make it back from labor duty before your body begins to protest. The ache in your shoulders becomes a hot knife, your palms ooze from rope burns, and a cough rattles in your chest like pebbles in a jar. Welcome to the other inescapable part of ancient Egyptian life. Medicine, or rather, the wild mix of herbs, honey, and incantations that passed for it. You drag yourself to the village healer, a man whose title sounds impressive, Sunu, physician, but whose toolkit looks more like a witch doctor's than a modern doctor's. He squats beside you, muttering words meant to chase away the demon believed to cause your illness. Yes, demons. Egyptians thought most sickness wasn't just bacteria or viruses, words they couldn't dream of, but evil spirits squatting inside your body. Imagine trying to fix a broken laptop by chanting at it. Same logic. Still, not everything is superstition. The healer applies honey to your wounds, and surprisingly, it works. Honey is naturally antibacterial. He mixes willow bark in a drink, which numbs your pain, a primitive aspirin centuries before Bayer packaged it. But then comes the bizarre part, a poultice of moldy bread smeared across your sores. You wrinkle your nose, but unbeknownst to you, mold carries penicillin-like effects. Maybe it's gross, but it helps. Then again, not every treatment is so lucky. For your cough, the healer recommends swallowing a concoction of dates, herbs, and animal dung. Supposedly, it drives out the bad spirit. In reality, it just makes you gag and wonder if death might be preferable. Other remedies include crocodile fat, lizard blood, or powdered donkey hoof. Each is delivered with solemn conviction. Your stomach, however, is less convinced. Dentistry is even worse. Egyptians loved sweets, dates, honey, beer, and their bread was full of sand from stone grinding. Your teeth, ground down like chalk, ache constantly. A dentist peers into your mouth, decides an abscess must be drained, and without hesitation jams a sharpened copper tool into your gum. No anesthesia, no gentle bedside manner, just pain so sharp you nearly faint. If you don't die from infection, you live with the memory. And surgery? It exists, but not the kind you'd want. Setting broken bones works fairly well. Splints and bandages made of linen hold limbs steady. But anything deeper, like cutting into flesh, often spells disaster. There's no understanding of sterilization, no concept of germs. Instruments are bronze, and they're not cleaned between patients. You can guess the outcome. Some remedies are simply charms. An amulet of the Eye of Horus tied around your neck, or prayers to Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of plague. Strangely, even if they don't cure the illness, they comfort you, making you feel less helpless. Maybe that's their real power. Historians still debate how advanced Egyptian medicine truly was. On one hand, their medical papyri contain hundreds of prescriptions, some surprisingly effective. On the other, plenty of treatments would get a modern doctor sued instantly. As you hobble away, still tasting the bitter aftershocks of dung medicine on your tongue, you realize you wouldn't last a day not just because of the hard labor, but because surviving the cures feels almost harder than surviving the diseases. You chuckle bitterly. Next time you catch a cold, you'll never complain about cough syrup again. You wake before dawn, not because your body is rested, hardly, but because the village priest's chanting drifts through the air, echoing like a low drumbeat carried by the Nile breeze. The sound isn't unpleasant, but it's constant, a reminder that in Egypt, you are never out of sight. The gods see you when you work, when you eat, when you whisper, even when you think about slacking off. Privacy isn't really a thing here. The divine gaze follows you as closely as the desert sun. As you shuffle into the temple courtyard, You realize religion isn't an occasional Sunday ritual. It's a daily, hourly anchor in every Egyptian's life. The temple is more than a house of worship. It's the beating heart of the community, a place of record-keeping, treasury, library, and even food distribution. Priests scurry around in white linen robes, shaved clean of hair to stay ritually pure. They spend more time bathing in cold water than you spend breathing. If cleanliness is next to godliness, these folks are practically living in heaven. You're pulled into a ritual offering before a looming statue of Horus, eyes inlaid with polished stone that glint unervingly. A priest places bread, fruit, and a jug of beer on the altar. It isn't symbolic. The food will later be eaten by temple staff, but the act itself is crucial. The gods must be fed, entertained, and soothed daily, or else chaos creeps closer. You watch nervously, wondering if one day someone might scold you for missing your own tiny prayer, and suddenly you'd be to blame for a bad flood or a failed crop. No pressure. And it's not just one god you must mind. There are dozens, each with their own specialties and moods. You want health? Pray to Sekhmet, but be careful. She's also goddess of plague. Need safe childbirth? Hathor's your ally. Crossing the river at night? A small chant to Sobuk, the crocodile god, might keep your limbs attached. You feel like you're living in a cosmic customer service queue. Pick the wrong department, and your request goes unanswered. Amulets weigh heavy on your neck and wrists. Faience charms shaped like scarabs, ankhs, or the protective eye of Horus. Without them, you'd feel naked. Even children toddle around jingling with protective trinkets, as if every toddler is a walking jewelry display. The logic is clear. Why risk angering unseen forces when a shiny blue beetle pendant might keep death at bay? Festivals, at least, break the routine. Imagine the whole town erupting into dance, music, and drunken revelry as sacred statues of gods are paraded down the streets on gilded boats. You find yourself swept into the chaos, shoulder to shoulder with hundreds, clapping and shouting as incense clouds the air. For a moment, the fear of divine surveillance transforms into joy, a shared rush that feels bigger than yourself. Yet beneath the laughter lingers anxiety. If the Nile fails to flood, if disease spreads, if a sandstorm tears across the fields, whispers start. Which god did we fail? Which offering was neglected? Someone is always guilty, and deep down you realize you're complicit too. There's no escape from the invisible audit of the divine. Some scholars argue the Egyptians were deeply pious. Others believe they were pragmatic, using religion mainly as a system of order and control. Both might be true. To you, caught in the middle, it just feels like you're constantly performing in front of an audience you can't see. So as you return home, the faint smell of incense clinging to your hair, you glance skyward and murmur a quick apology, to which god you're not sure, just covering your bases. Because in Egypt, even forgetting to say sorry could be the mistake that tips your day from bad to unbearable. The sun is already high when you shuffle toward the market, and the heat makes every step feel like wading through warm soup. You think you're ready for the chaos, but the first wave that hits you isn't the crowd. It's the smell. Imagine mixing fish left too long in the sun, roasted barley, burning incense, and the faint sweetness of honey cakes, all swirling together like some aggressive perfume that never got tested on focus groups. It's overwhelming, and it clings to your nose like glue. Vendors shout in voices roughened by dust, their cries overlapping until it's impossible to tell one offer from another. A man waves a basket of onions in your face, swearing his bulbs are blessed by Hathor herself. A woman next to him sings the praises of her beer, brewed thick and cloudy, more like liquid bread than anything modern drinkers would recognize. Kids dart between the legs of donkeys, trying to snatch dates or figs without getting smacked. The whole place is alive with energy, the kind that could make or break your day depending on whether you've got the right goods to trade. Coins exist, sure, but bartering rules everything. You watch a fisherman haggle furiously with a potter, trading a fat tilapia for a clay jar. A farmer nearby lays out flax bundles, hoping to swap them for sandals. You quickly realize your modern sense of fixed prices would leave you hopeless. Here, it's all about arguing until one side pretends to be satisfied. And if you hesitate too long, someone else swoops in to snatch the deal from under your nose. The sounds pile up: braying donkeys, squealing pigs, clattering copper bowls, the distant ring of a scribe's reed pen scratching receipts on papyrus. Somewhere, a musician plucks at a lute while a boy beats a small drum, not to entertain but to cut through the noise and grab attention for their father's stall. The result is less background music and more battle of the bands at full blast. You spot luxuries too: exotic oils from Punt, beads of carnelian and turquoise, and spices that smell suspiciously better than everything else here. These are out of reach for ordinary hands, but you can't help leaning closer. For a moment, your nose catches a whiff of cinnamon, and you imagine modern cinnamon rolls, only to be yanked back to reality by a goat nudging your hip. And then there's the fish, always the fish. Piles of them shimmer under the brutal sun, their scales dulled, their eyes glazed. The vendors fan them with palm leaves to slow the inevitable, but you know better. Even from yards away, you can smell that most of these would make a modern fridge cry for mercy. Still, people buy eagerly, trusting salt and fire to hide what freshness has abandoned. As you weave through, you realize the market isn't just commerce, it's gossip central. Women trade whispers about who's pregnant, who's cheating, which neighbor skimped on offerings at the temple. Men debate crop yields, politics, and the latest tax demands. Every conversation is fuel for the social machine. Miss the market and you miss life itself. You clutch your tiny purchase, some bread and maybe an onion, feeling both exhausted and oddly exhilarated. The market has drained you, your ears still ringing with its chorus, your clothes perfumed with a mix of incense and donkey sweat. And tomorrow you'll be back again, because in Egypt, survival depends not just on what you grow, but on how well you can swim in this river of noise and smells. By the time you escape the market, you think you're safe. You think the chaos is behind you. But then a scribe, with his little ink-stained fingers and that sly, self-important smirk, calls out your name, or at least he tries. He's got a papyrus scroll rolled under one arm and announces, in a voice that could cut glass, that you've been summoned. Not to dinner, not to a festival, to court. Your heart sinks, because in ancient Egypt, court doesn't mean marble halls and powdered wigs. It means standing in front of a line of officials who know every neighbor's dirty laundry, and might just air yours, too. The case could be about anything. Someone accusing you of shorting them on barley, stealing a goat, or encroaching on a field boundary. Or maybe it's pettier still, like who owns the rights to a shade tree where both families insist on sitting. Yes, people actually argued over trees. And don't even get me started on water rights. Those disputes could drag on longer than the Nile flood itself. When you arrive, the courtroom looks more like a shaded courtyard. Judges, often priests or scribes moonlighting as officials, sit cross-legged with scrolls laid before them, reed pens ready. You're ordered to speak your case clearly, which is harder than it sounds when the opposing side is yelling, the crowd is jeering, and the donkey tethered nearby keeps braying like it's auditioning to be the star witness. Evidence is laughably subjective. Witnesses step forward, often friends or rivals with their own agendas. Sometimes, oaths are sworn in the names of gods, and the officials scribble them down with great ceremony. But everyone knows that bribes can slide beneath the papyrus like a coin slipped under the table at a diner. And here's the kicker. You can't really defend yourself with, "That's unfair." The law is a web spun from tradition, precedent, and religious duty. Arguing too much only makes you look guilty. One particularly strange punishment, rarely used but famous in stories, involved oaths of truth tied to crocodiles. Imagine being asked to swear honesty before a crocodile god statue, knowing full well that somewhere nearby, an actual crocodile is sunning itself with jaws that could snap your spine in two. It's like taking a polygraph test while the machine is also hungry. And of course, the scribes keep meticulous records. Papyrus after papyrus, stacked neatly, every insult, every bribe, every awkward pause captured in ink. Future historians will dig these up and marvel at how you argued about a stolen goat for 4 hours on a Tuesday. Meanwhile, you just wish you'd stayed home and hidden under your reed mat. What's worse is how slow it all feels. Cases drag with endless recitations of who owned what, when, and where. You're sweating in the heat, staring at a fly crawling across the papyrus, while the official drones on like the world's most boring audiobook. And when judgment finally comes, it may not feel like justice, it feels like survival. If you're lucky, the punishment is just a fine of grain or a slap on the wrist. If unlucky, labor, lashes, or worse. The crowd disperses quickly, gossip already flying. Did you see how nervous he was? I bet he's guilty. Serves him right for cheating old Hori out of barley. You realize that in Egypt, reputation is as fragile as papyrus, and once it tears, you'll never quite patch it back together. So you shuffle home, relieved but drained, wondering how many more disputes you'll have to face in a world where even sitting under the wrong tree can land you in front of a priest with a pen. By the time you've trudged away from the court, you can't help but notice how uneven everything feels. It's like living in a world tilted permanently sideways. You pass by the villa of a wealthy nobleman, walls painted with bright colors that still gleam even in the dust, guards lounging lazily by the doorway with gold-tipped staffs. And then, only a few steps later, you see mud brick huts where families squeeze into a single smoky room, cooking onions and bread on fires that make your eyes sting just walking by. You belong to the second crowd, of course. The moment you catch sight of a noble's villa, you know you don't belong on that side of the street. Guards shoot you a look like you've already committed a crime just for glancing too long. They've got jewelry that could feed your family for months, while you're still picking barley husks out of your teeth from lunch. Inside those villas, things are a different world. Cushions stuffed with goose feathers, jars of honey stacked like it's nothing, and music drifting from hired harpists whose sole job is to strum away boredom. Outside, though, your world is heat, sweat, and the sound of kids chasing each other barefoot in the dust. Even the shadows feel unequal. Noble houses have high walls that block the sun, while your little hut bakes like bread left too long in an oven. You try not to envy, but it's hard when you see their clothing. Fine linen so sheer and cool you wonder if it's even legal to be that comfortable. Yours? Rough, itchy, patched so many times it's practically a quilt pretending to be a tunic. And laundry days are a nightmare. You scrub and scrub, but the stains never leave, while noble robes look like they've been kissed by moonlight itself. Food tells the same story. Nobles dine on roasted duck with figs and dates, while you chew hard bread until your jaw aches. Once in a while, you might get a piece of fish if you're lucky. Otherwise, it's beer so thick you could practically eat it with a spoon and onions, always onions. Your stomach doesn't complain, but your soul does. And then there's justice, or the lack of it. Remember the court you just stumbled through? If you'd been a noble, chances are that goat dispute would have been settled before you even walked in. Wealth greases palms like oil, and suddenly laws bend like reeds in the flood. You, on the other hand, feel like you're made of mud, easy to mold, easy to step on, never leaving much of a mark. One odd fact sticks in your mind, though. Even wealthy Egyptians feared losing their afterlife privileges if they were cruel. They buried themselves with spells and charms to prove their purity of heart. But purity didn't exactly stop them from working their servants to exhaustion in this life. You can't help but think it's a little like someone leaving a 5-star Yelp review for themselves in advance. As you wander back through your part of town, you pass a craftsman polishing a wooden stool, his hands calloused and his back bent. He mutters that nobles order his work, but often never pay in full. Yet, he says, refusing them is impossible. You nod, because you know, in this land, survival means swallowing unfairness like a bitter drink. The night creeps in, cooler air settling, and smoke rising from 100 clay ovens. Families huddle close, laughing despite the hunger, telling stories to distract from aching feet. And you realize that's the only place the rich and poor are equal. Under the stars, where even a noble can't buy an extra constellation. The first thing that strikes you is the smell. You've been dragged, almost unwillingly, toward a funeral procession. At first, you think it might be something grand, like the burial of a noble or a wealthy scribe. The music is loud, with drums and rattling sistra, women wailing in voices that cut the air like knives. You squeeze through the crowd, craning your neck. The coffin is painted, dazzling with blues and golds, carved with eyes that seem to look right through you. But then you notice something odd. Even the poorest funerals here demand theatrics. It doesn't matter if the dead man lived in a hut smaller than a noble's closet. There will still be incense, still be hired mourners, still be a coffin with symbols drawn hastily in soot if gold paint is too expensive. Because in Egypt, death is the main event. Life is the warm-up act. The priests chant words you don't understand. They wave burning resin in clay burners, the smoke drifting heavy and sweet. You cough, eyes watering, and wonder how anyone can stand there for hours. The coffin tilts and bobs as it's carried toward the embalmer's tent. A few children whisper about the house of purification, where bodies are washed and salted like fish. You shudder. You hear an older man mutter that the rich can afford the full treatment. Organs removed, jars blessed with spells, the body wrapped in linen finer than anything you'll ever wear. But if you're poor, well, maybe you get dumped into the desert sand and hope the dry wind preserves you. It's a grim kind of lottery. You can't help thinking, it's the first time in your life the sun actually does you a favor. One strange detail you catch. Some people smear mud on their faces to show grief, while others pour beer onto the ground to feed the dead. Beer of all things. You wince, thinking how precious each sip is when you're alive. But here, death has the bigger appetite. The coffin disappears inside a chamber. Priests lift their arms, chanting louder now, calling upon Anubis, the jackal-headed god who guides souls. Someone behind you whispers that if your heart is heavier than a feather in the hall of judgment, you'll be eaten by a monster with a crocodile's head, a lion's body, and a hippopotamus's rear end. You stifle a laugh because honestly, it sounds like an ancient version of a badly designed video game boss. But no one else is laughing. They're pale, serious, frightened. You picture your own heart weighed on a golden scale. Would you pass? You think of the lies you've told, the barley you once stole, the silent anger you carry when nobles push you aside. Your chest feels heavy already. The mourners wail louder, some tearing at their hair. A woman collapses dramatically, clutching the ground. For a second, you wonder if it's sincere or if she's one of those professional mourners people hire. Women who cry on cue better than any modern soap opera star. You try not to grin, but it's hard not to see the absurdity in all that noise. Yet, beneath the performance, something real stirs in you. Death here isn't just an ending. It's a journey so long and complicated, you doubt you'd ever manage the paperwork. Spells, charms, correct prayers, amulets to place over the heart. Forget to pack one thing, and your afterlife vacation might get canceled. And still, despite all that, ordinary Egyptians scrape together whatever they can, hoping that even a modest ritual gives them a fighting chance beyond the grave. As the night deepens, torches flicker on the faces of the crowd. You step back uneasy. The weight of death presses on your shoulders, and suddenly the warm sand under your feet feels like a burial shroud waiting for you. You shake it off with a nervous laugh. Because really, survive the desert heat, avoid the crocodiles, dodge the whip of a noble, and then, after all that, you still risk being eaten by a cosmic chimera? Yeah. You're starting to think you wouldn't last even one day here. The morning starts before the sun even peeks over the horizon. You're shaken awake by the voice of an overseer, his shouts slicing through the cool darkness. Your back aches. Your mouth feels like it's been stuffed with sand, and you realize you're being herded with dozens of others toward a massive worksite. No chance for a leisurely breakfast here, just a gulp of sour beer and maybe a stale chunk of bread, if you're lucky. Then it's tools in hand, body in line. The site looms ahead of you, half-finished walls climbing toward the sky, wooden scaffolds creaking like tired bones, blocks of stone scattered in organized chaos. It's a temple project, you're told. A gift to a god. You suspect the god probably doesn't care if the walls are 2 feet taller, but the pharaoh does, and that's enough to keep you dragging your feet forward. A guard with a whip paces behind the group. He doesn't even need to use it much. Just the sound of leather cracking in the air makes your stomach twist. You stumble into position, handed a crude copper chisel and a mallet. Around you, men grunt as they chip at limestone, sparks flying when the sun finally hits the tools. The rhythm is hypnotic, but not in a soothing way. It's more like a drumbeat pounding into your skull. Sweat starts to pour after only minutes. The sun climbs higher, a relentless overseer of its own. You tie a scrap of cloth around your forehead, but it's already soaked. Dust coats your teeth, your tongue, the inside of your nose. When you sneeze, it comes out as mud. You think wistfully of that miracle cream made from crocodile dung you once joked about. At least it smelled better than this. A funny thing, you notice how the workers keep singing little chants while hauling stones. The songs are rough, sometimes silly, sometimes a little dirty, but they keep the rhythm steady. Without them, the team pulling a block with ropes might falter. You join in awkwardly, your voice cracking, but no one laughs. They're too busy keeping pace. It strikes you that music might be the only thing holding your sanity together here. By midday, the heat is unbearable. A runner brings jars of water, but by the time they reach you, the liquid is warm, tasting faintly of clay. You gulp it anyway. Someone mutters that too much water in the wrong hour can make you collapse. You're not sure if that's science or just superstition, but either way, you feel your stomach slosh uncomfortably. You glance at the overseer. He's fanning himself under the shade of a canopy while scribes take notes. Their job? Recording exactly how many stones were cut, how many men showed up, how many fainted. You realize you're more of a number than a person here. Some historians later will argue whether laborers like you were slaves or just heavily taxed citizens volunteering. But in this moment, with blisters forming on your palms and your shoulders screaming, the difference feels meaningless. One odd detail you overhear: the workers joke about how the pharaoh won't live long enough to see this temple finished anyway. They laugh nervously because saying it too loudly could get you whipped, or worse. You chuckle under your breath, imagining all the sweat for a building the gods may not even visit. The sun leans toward afternoon, and exhaustion hits like a brick. Your arms refuse to lift. A young boy beside you suddenly collapses. No one stops. The work continues as if he's invisible, until finally 2 men drag him into the shade. You're too afraid to ask if he'll recover. And then, as the day closes, the overseer finally calls it. You stagger away, your back bent, your ears ringing with phantom hammer strikes. You wonder how many days like this you could survive before your body simply gives up. A part of you wants to laugh. It feels like one of those modern extreme fitness boot camps. Except instead of six-pack abs, you just get broken bones. You fall into the dirt, too tired to eat. And yet, staring at the half-built walls glowing orange in the setting sun, you feel something eerie. This temple will stand for centuries. Your sweat will dry, your name will be forgotten, but your handprints will live in stone. You wonder, is that worth all this suffering? Probably not, but you don't get to choose. The morning air in your little mud brick house is heavy, thick with the smell of last night's fire and something sour you can't quite place. You wake to the sound of grinding. Your neighbor has already started with her hand mill, the rasp of stone on grain echoing like a constant reminder that you're behind. As a woman in this place, in this time, your day begins not with choice but with duty. You kneel before your own quern, a flat slab with another stone you press and drag over handfuls of barley. The motion is endless, like rowing a boat that never leaves the shore. Each push sends a cloud of fine dust up your nose, into your throat. You cough, eyes watering, and your chest burns. Years of this would leave your lungs scarred. Archaeologists centuries later will find rib cages etched with those scars, a silent testimony to your invisible labor. But right now, you only know your arms ache and your belly growls. When the grain is fine enough, you mix it with water and a pinch of sour starter kept alive from yesterday. The smell is sharp, tangy, almost alive itself. You pat the dough flat, toss it onto a clay griddle. Smoke fills the tiny room. You wave your hand, squinting, and realize your eyes sting every day, as if the house itself resents your presence. You'll lose your sight early here, not from age but from smoke. Your children stir on the straw mat. They're already scratching at their arms, red blotches raised from fleas. You brush a louse from your daughter's hair, flicking it into the fire, but you know there are thousands more. You smile weakly anyway, pretending all is well, and tear pieces of bread for their small hands. The bread tastes gritty, full of husks and tiny bits of stone that snuck in during the grinding. Each bite feels like chewing sand. Your teeth ache. You've heard old women laugh bitterly about how, by 30, your smile is nothing but stumps. You look at your reflection in a pot of water and wonder how many years you have before you can't chew at all. Still, there's work to do. You step outside with a jar to fetch water. The path is long, the sun already hot. You balance the jar on your head like you've been trained since childhood, but each step feels heavier. You think of modern gyms with their neat little treadmills and laugh inwardly. This walk would put them to shame. You pass women gossiping at the well, their voices rising and falling like birdsong. They trade stories of sick children, of husbands pressed into work crews, of offerings that swallowed what little they had. You nod politely but keep moving, your chores won't do themselves. Back at the house, you tend to a small clay oven patching cracks with mud. A chicken squawks nearby, more valuable alive than roasted, though you dream of its taste. Instead, you cook a thin stew of lentils, onions, maybe a stray fish if the river blessed you. The smell is comforting, if not filling. A strange fact you remember: women here brew the beer, not the men. It's your domain, this sour, cloudy drink that keeps everyone alive when water turns foul. You stir the bubbling pot, inhaling its earthy aroma, and smile at the thought of your neighbors stumbling home from a jug of your best batch. By midday, the sun is merciless. You retreat into the dim interior of your home. The children whine, restless, so you hum them a song your mother once sang. The simple, repetitive, and you realize with a start it's the same rhythm the laborers chant while hauling stone. The whole society beats to these same patterns, like the Nile itself flowing steady and slow. But illness lurks in every corner. Your youngest coughs with a rattling sound that chills you. You rub her back with oil, whispering prayers to Tauret, the hippo goddess of childbirth and mothers. Maybe she listens, maybe she doesn't. Historians still argue whether these household devotions mattered in daily life, or if they were just desperate comfort. But for you, clutching your daughter, it's the only thread of hope you have. The day drags on, grinding, baking, hauling, patching, soothing. By evening, your hands are cracked, your back bent. You chew another bite of gritty bread, washing it down with a swallow of sour beer, and lie down on the mat beside your children. As they drift to sleep, you stare at the ceiling, smoke-darkened, and wonder if tomorrow will be any different. Spoiler, it won't. And honestly, you probably wouldn't last a week in this life, let alone a day. But you smile in the dark anyway, because somehow, against the dust, the smoke, the fleas, you made it through. The night hasn't fully faded when you stir awake, but already you feel the heaviness in your chest. Something rattles when you breathe, like a flute played badly. You try to shake it off, but here in ancient Egypt, illness is as much a part of life as the rising Nile. And it's not just the common coughs and stomach aches. You live in a place where the very air seems to whisper sickness into your body. You rub at your stomach, sore from yesterday's gritty bread, and think about how almost everyone here has parasites writhing inside them. Worms are the invisible roommates you never invited. You scratch your skin and wonder if that's just another flea bite or something crawling beneath the surface. When you wash in the Nile, you don't feel cleansed. You feel like the river itself is laughing, offering new diseases along with its cool embrace. Soon, you're brought before a SWNW, a physician. The man's head is shaved, his fingers stained with herbs. He mutters a chant under his breath, not just for effect. He believes the words themselves heal, like medicine for the soul. He presses his hands to your abdomen, frowns, and mixes a paste of honey, crushed garlic, and moldy bread. He spreads it over your skin with confidence. Centuries later, scientists will recognize mold as penicillin in its earliest form. But right now, all you know is that it stings, and the smell makes your stomach churn. The treatments can be shocking. Got a headache? They might smear you with fish paste. Toothache? You'll chew on ground-up donkey hooves or maybe a little incense mixed with beer. You can't tell whether it's healing or just humiliation. At least honey feels safe. It's practically sacred, used in almost every remedy. You sip it mixed with herbs, sticky sweetness clinging to your lips. Then there are the more unsettling cures. For fertility, you're told to swallow a mixture of crocodile dung and sour milk. For burns, lizard fat is rubbed into your skin. You try not to gag as you imagine someone collecting those ingredients. You glance at the healer's shelves and notice jars filled with things that look suspiciously like dried organs. He explains calmly that these powders hold the essence of life. You don't argue. Surgery exists here, but you don't want to experience it. Bronze scalpels, obsidian blades sharper than anything modern surgeons use, and no anesthetic except maybe strong beer and a whispered prayer. If your tooth rots beyond saving, it will be yanked out, and you will scream, and no one will think less of you for it. If your arm festers from infection, well, better to cut it off than let the rot spread. And yes, sometimes they even succeed. Archaeologists will later find skeletons that survived amputations, proof of both skill and stubborn will to live. But healing is never just physical. The line between medicine and magic blurs constantly. A priest might be called in to recite spells from the Ebers Papyrus, each word meant to untangle the knot of illness in your body. You lie still, eyes half closed, as incense smoke curls in the dim room, and the priest's voice soothes you, not because you believe in it fully, but because hope itself feels like part of the cure. A strange, almost secret truth. Egyptian doctors were some of the most specialized in the ancient world. One might only treat eyes, another only stomachs. They had knowledge passed down carefully, written in flowing hieratic script. Yet, for all their wisdom, they still told you disease came from angry gods, from spirits drifting in the night. You nod because arguing with that seems pointless, especially when you're the one sick on the floor. As the day wears on, you sip more herbal brews. The bitterness lingers, and you dream of modern aspirin, neat little tablets in a child-proof bottle. Here, relief is slower, uncertain. You pray to Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of plagues, begging her to turn her claws away. You touch your amulet, worn smooth by years of desperate fingers, and hope it carries some weight in the unseen world. The truth is, even if you survive today's fever, tomorrow will bring another challenge. Disease is constant, healing is inconsistent, and you, fragile, modern, unprepared, you wouldn't last a day, let alone a lifetime, in this dance between sickness and hope. Still, as the healer pats your shoulder and hands you another cup of bitter brew, you manage a smile. At least honey makes everything go down a little easier. By the time your fever fades and the healer's chants dissolve into memory, you realize something surprising. Egyptians don't spend all their time just farming, praying, or fighting off plagues. There's laughter here and music and games. You're swept into it almost before you can protest, as if the whole village is saying, "Yes, life is hard, but why not play a little while we can?" The sound reaches you first, soft strings plucked on a lute, joined by the breathy call of a reed flute. The rhythm of a hand drum follows, quickening your pulse. Music is everywhere in Egypt, from temples to taverns, from royal courts to humble mud-brick homes. A neighbor claps in time and grins at you, urging you closer. You find yourself sitting in the shade, tapping your foot, even though you don't quite know the song. Musicians here are revered, not just entertainers but almost conduits between people and the gods. Some play the harp so gracefully that you swear the Nile itself bends toward the sound. And then someone pulls out a sistrum, a kind of rattle with bronze discs that chime when shaken. The sharp, tinkling rhythm cuts through the air, instantly festive. You laugh before you realize it because the whole thing feels like a jam session at a modern park, just with more linen kilts and fewer sunglasses. Soon after, a board is set before you. 2 rows of squares, little carved pieces ready to move. The Senate, the game of the afterlife. To the Egyptians, this isn't just fun. It's symbolic. Each roll of the sticks is a step toward eternity, each square a trial or blessing. You watch as an old man moves his piece with a sly grin, clearly a master at this game. You fumble your turn, your piece sent back by fate, or maybe by his experience. The table erupts in laughter. You're reminded of losing badly at Monopoly with friends. Only here the stakes feel cosmic. But not all games are solemn. Children race through the streets playing with balls of tightly wound papyrus, or spinning wooden tops that hum faintly when they wobble. A few girls toss knucklebones in the dust, catching them midair with quick hands, their giggles ringing out like little bells. You try to join, but your reflexes don't impress anyone. A boy shrugs, pats your arm, and runs off, already chasing something else. And then comes the feast. Platters appear: bread, dates, roast duck, fresh fish. Beer foams in clay mugs, thick and sweet. There's singing now, dancers twirling with colored ribbons, their anklets jangling in time with the drum. Someone presses a cup into your hand, and though the beer tastes a little like liquid bread left out in the sun too long, you drink anyway. Soon the room feels warmer, the music louder, your worries softened at the edges. It's here, half dizzy from the rhythm, that you notice how much of this joy is communal. Entertainment isn't something watched from a screen or listened to through earbuds. It's shared, danced together, sung together, laughed over face to face. You're not just a spectator, you're swept into the current whether you want to be or not. A curious little fact slides into your mind. Even pharaohs loved their entertainment. Inscriptions describe them enjoying jesters, acrobats, and elaborate banquets with games of senate that lasted through the night. Some rulers even had dwarfs in their courts, treasured for their dancing and storytelling. Scholars still debate whether this was simple amusement or something sacred, tied to luck and protection. You lean back, stomach full, ears ringing with song, watching firelight flicker against painted walls. For a moment, you forget the heat, the dust, the worms in the bread. For a moment, you think, maybe you could last here if every day ended with music and laughter like this. Then someone hands you another mug of that warm, porridge-like beer, and you gag a little. Nope, still not built for this world. The morning sun glares like a golden blade across the water, and you find yourself clambering onto a wooden boat that creaks as though it has sailed since the dawn of time. The Nile stretches out before you, vast and gleaming, more like a living vein than a river. Without it, Egypt is just sand and silence. With it, there's grain, fish, travel, gossip, and life itself. You wobble on the deck, trying to keep your balance while men around you push the vessel away from the muddy bank with long poles. The air is heavy with the scent of river reeds and damp wood. Sailors unfurl a square sail of coarse linen, catching the northerly wind that allows them to drift southward, while the current will carry them back north when the time comes. Ingenious, really, you realize this river is like a built-in highway, moving people and goods effortlessly centuries before asphalt ever existed. As the boat glides forward, the banks pass slowly by. Date palms lean over the edge of the water, children splash naked in the shallows, women stoop to wash laundry, their chatter carrying across the waves. A fisherman tosses a net that spreads like a silver fan before sinking beneath the surface. His movements are quick and practiced, but you wonder what else lurks beneath. Because let's be honest, Egyptians share this water with creatures you'd rather not meet. Your eyes fix on a shadow sliding just beneath the surface. Then you see the armored back rise, scales glinting, jaws yawning open. Yes, a crocodile. A Nile crocodile. Longer than your bed, maybe longer than your apartment. Your pulse jumps as the beast disappears again, leaving only ripples. People on the boat barely glance. For them, it's just Tuesday. You hug the side rail, hoping the wood is thick enough. Spoiler, it probably isn't. Merchants shuffle around you, adjusting baskets of goods. There are jars of beer, sacks of emmer grain, bundles of papyrus reeds bound tightly together. They talk about selling linen at a village upriver, or picking up cedar wood brought all the way from Lebanon. You realize this isn't just a river trip, it's commerce, diplomacy, and survival. A world connected by water. One man offers you dried fish wrapped in palm leaves. You try a bite and immediately regret it. It's salty enough to turn your lips into a desert. He laughs, claps your shoulder, and keeps chewing. Egyptians apparently have stomachs forged from iron. You, on the other hand, quietly daydream of cold bottled water and a packet of chips. The voyage is slow. Hours pass, the sail flapping lazily, until you're lulled by the rhythmic splash of oars. You catch sight of temple pylons in the distance, massive and imposing, as though guarding the river. Painted barges adorned with flowers drift past, carrying priests and offerings. Even funerals happen on the Nile, bodies ferried across as if this river itself is a rehearsal for crossing into the afterlife. A strange little fact drifts through your thoughts. Some scholars believe that boats were among the very first things Egyptians buried with their dead. Entire vessels, real, functional ships, sealed away for eternity, so the departed could keep sailing even in the land of the gods. Imagine being so attached to your commute that you want to take the bus with you into the afterlife. Evening falls. The sky burns orange and violet, the river catching every flame of color. You sit with the crew as they pull the boat into a shallow cove. A small fire is lit on shore, smoke curling into the dusk. Fish are roasted on sticks, the smell sharp but comforting. You're offered a piece again. This time you chew slowly, forcing yourself to appreciate the simple flavor. It tastes of survival, of patience, of thousands of years lived beside the same flowing water. As the stars rise above the desert horizon, the Nile laps gently at the shore, whispering against mud and reed. You realize you've traveled not just a distance, but into the heart of what keeps Egypt alive. Without this river, there would be no pyramids, no temples, no laughter echoing through villages. Just sand, silence, and you not lasting even a day. The next morning, you stagger off the boat and follow a procession of voices, drums, and clattering cymbals into a village square that's anything but quiet. The air trembles with the rhythm of celebration. Bright banners flap in the breeze, painted with gods whose faces are half animal, half human, and fully intimidating. You smell roasting goose, honey cakes, and spilled beer fermenting in the sun. It's a festival, and you've walked right into the center of it. People are dressed in linen robes freshly washed and perfumed with lotus oil. Children chase one another with clay rattles, while elders sway to the beat of sistrums, those jangling metal instruments that sound a bit like tambourines on overdrive. The heat is already sweltering, but the crowd is electric, moving together like a single body. At the front, a gilded bark, an ornate shrine carried on the shoulders of chanting priests, wobbles down the street. Draped in garlands, the bark is said to contain the statue of a god, hidden from your mortal eyes. The priests wear immaculate white robes, shaved heads glistening with sweat, their voices steady as they chant hymns older than anyone here can remember. You wonder how many generations have sung the exact same words, word for word, tone for tone, as though time itself has been looping for centuries. You're shoved along as the bark turns toward the temple. Incense wafts through the air, sharp and sweet, mingling with the smoke of cooking fires. Your nose twitches, you half expect someone to sell cotton candy or glow sticks, but no, just bread, beer, and dates. This is their version of a carnival, except the rides are spiritual and the stakes involve eternal order versus cosmic chaos. A girl tugs at your sleeve, offering a small clay amulet shaped like the Eye of Horus. She whispers that it will protect you, but her mischievous grin makes you think she's just running a side hustle. You hand over a small bead anyway. It feels rude to refuse, and tuck the amulet under your tunic, trying to look like you belong here. The crowd thickens as dancers appear, their bodies painted with ochre, their movements hypnotic. Drums pound, and suddenly you're swept into the momentum, clapping in awkward rhythm. People glance at you but laugh good-naturedly, as if forgiving your two left feet. There's a joy in their faces, a kind of release that makes you realize this isn't just fun, it's survival. Festivals like these are a way to reaffirm order, to tell the gods, we're here, we remember, please keep the Nile flooding and the sun rising. An old man beside you mutters something fascinating, that during the Opet festival in Thebes, the statue of Ammonius would be carried in procession from Karnak to Luxor, linking gods with kings, heaven with earth. He insists the god himself walks among people when the bark is carried, though others say it's just symbolic. Scholars today still argue whether Egyptians saw these divine statues as literal bodies of gods or just sacred representations. But in the heat of the moment, with incense thick around you and the chanting rolling like thunder, you can't help but feel the presence is real. As night falls, the celebration only grows louder. Torches light up the darkness, flames flickering across painted walls and shining eyes. Beer flows freely, laughter rises, and the drums never stop. You chew on a honey cake someone presses into your hands, sticky and sweet, and think, So this is what a block party looked like 3,000 years ago. Except here, if you misbehave, you risk offending a god instead of just your neighbor. Finally, the chanting softens, and the bark is carried back inside the temple, vanishing into shadow. The people bow, then slowly scatter back to their homes, their bellies full and their spirits soothed. You're left standing under a night sky littered with stars, ears still ringing with drums. Your feet ache, your tunic smells like incense and beer, and you realize again you wouldn't last a day here. Yet somehow, the rhythm of the festival has pulled you along, as if Egypt itself refuses to let you slip away just yet. The next sunrise greets you with no drums or incense, but with the dull sound of an argument spilling out into the street. A man in a ragged linen kilt is shouting that someone stole his goat, while another, red-faced, denies the accusation. The shouting gathers a crowd quickly, and before you can blink, both men are being dragged by neighbors toward a small chamber with mud brick walls where judgment will be passed. You've stumbled into the world of Egyptian law, and suddenly it feels less like a festival and more like an episode of courtroom drama. Except the judge here doesn't wear a powdered wig or bang a gavel. Instead, he sits cross-legged on a reed mat, holding a wooden staff, his bald head gleaming in the sunlight streaming through the doorway. Behind him hangs a carved image of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and balance, her feather a constant reminder that order, not chaos, must guide every decision. The proceedings begin in a way that feels startlingly modern. Each man states his case. The supposed goat thief insists his neighbor has always been jealous, while the accuser swears by the Nile that his goat bleated all night until it was dragged away. You're almost waiting for someone to shout, "Objection!" But no such thing comes. Instead, witnesses are called. Two boys who claim they saw hoofprints in the sand leading suspiciously toward the defendant's yard. Your attention shifts to the scribe in the corner. He bends over a piece of papyrus, stylus scratching out every word with careful strokes of black ink. His role is crucial. Records of cases are evidence, precedent, and history rolled into one. Without him, it's as though the trial never existed. You wonder how many papyri still lie buried under sand somewhere, filled with human dramas like this, lost for thousands of years. The accused looks nervous now. In Egypt, punishments are no joke. If guilty, he might face confiscation of property, forced labor, or public flogging. In harsher cases, especially crimes against temples or the pharaoh, punishment could mean mutilation, exile, or even death. The Egyptians believed that a crime wasn't just against another person but against Ma'at itself, disrupting cosmic order. So every verdict carried weight far beyond the squabble of two villagers. As the judge listens, he holds a small figurine of Ma'at in his hand, reminding everyone in the room that the decision must reflect truth and balance. At last, he speaks. The accused is found guilty. There's no drawn-out sentencing. Two guards seize the man, and the punishment is swift. A series of lashes across his back in front of the crowd. The goat, or rather its replacement, is returned to the accuser. Justice, Egyptian style. You shiver watching it, thinking how you'd fare under such a system. Jaywalk in this world? That might get you whipped. Forget to return something borrowed? The local priest-judge might not see it as harmless. Egyptians didn't have lawyers to argue your case. You had to defend yourself with your words, your reputation, and maybe a few loyal neighbors willing to speak for you. Yet there's a strange reassurance in it all. Everyone seems to accept the verdict, and the crowd disperses quickly. There are no appeals courts, no endless bureaucracy. Justice is fast, public, and tied to a divine ideal. Some historians still debate how much of this was truly fair and how much was designed to keep people obedient. But standing here, you realize it's less about individual rights and more about the survival of society itself. You rub the amulet the girl gave you at the festival, suddenly grateful for its supposed protection. In a world where justice is both swift and severe, even a clay charm feels like insurance. You walk away from the courthouse, shoulders tense, thinking once again that you really wouldn't last a day here, not with your modern habit of complaining about speeding tickets. By the time you leave the village courthouse, the air feels heavier, almost as if something unseen presses on your shoulders. The Nile is quiet that afternoon, the reed beds whispering in the wind. But instead of a market cry or the laughter of children, you hear a slow, steady rhythm, drums. The sound carries you to the edge of town where people in linen garments dyed with saffron and indigo have gathered, their faces solemn. A funeral procession moves past. At first glance, it looks ceremonial, but then you notice the grief etched into the lines of a woman's face as she clutches her chest and wails. Behind her, mourners raise their arms toward the sky, their cries carrying the sorrow of losing not just a loved one, but a soul that now must travel into eternity. And you, uninvited but unremarked, drift closer. At the center of the procession lies the body, carefully wrapped in rough linen for transport, resting in a wooden litter. The scent of resin, incense, and something sharp, natron salt, tickles your nose. You realize you are seeing the very first stage of what would become one of the world's most famous practices: mummification. Inside the embalmer's workshop, the body will undergo a transformation designed not just to preserve flesh but to secure the soul's passage. Natron dries the body, resin seals it, linen binds it. Organs are removed and placed into canopic jars, each guarded by the sons of Horus: falcon-headed Cabesonuf, jackal-headed Duamutef, human-headed Imsidi, and baboon-headed Happy. The heart, however, is usually left in place, for it is the seat of thought and morality. Without it, the soul cannot be judged. You flinch a little imagining the tools, hooked instruments reaching through the nostrils to remove the brain. It feels almost surgical, though the goal is metaphysical. Egyptians didn't think the brain was important at all. It was the heart that mattered. If that detail makes you smirk, you're not alone. Even scholars today still shake their heads at how entire civilizations could revere one organ and dismiss another. Yet perhaps your own descendants will find modern ideas just as quaint. As you watch, women take up the role of professional mourners, wailing and tearing their hair in a display so loud it feels choreographed. Their job is to amplify grief so the gods themselves will hear it. You imagine hiring someone to cry at your funeral today. It feels absurd, but here, it's sacred. The body will eventually be laid within a coffin decorated with painted eyes, ankhs, and prayers. Wealthier families add gilding, jewels, and even multiple nested coffins. And beyond that waits the tomb. Whether a simple pit in the sand, a rock-cut chamber, or an elaborate structure lined with food, furniture, and Shapti figurines meant to serve the deceased in the afterlife. But the journey isn't over at burial. The most crucial trial is still ahead. The weighing of the heart in the Hall of Two Truths. You picture it. The deceased standing before Osiris, god of the underworld, while Anubis, jackal-headed, places the heart on one side of a scale. On the other side lies the feather of Ma'at. If the heart proves heavy with sin, Ammit waits nearby, jaws wide. Part crocodile, part lion, part hippo, she is the devourer of souls. No second chances, no appeals. One bite, and your existence is erased forever. You shiver. Suddenly, traffic court back home feels merciful. The Egyptians lived with this vision constantly. Every act, big or small, was measured against the cosmic balance. Stealing bread, lying about your goat, even cheating scales in the marketplace. All of it could weigh your heart down in eternity. That's why funerary texts like the Book of the Dead included negative confessions, where the deceased declares, "I have not stolen. I have not lied, I have not slain. A list of denials to tip the balance in one's favor. Some historians still debate how accessible these rituals were to common folk. Was mummification only for the rich? Did peasants simply rely on sand burials to preserve them? Evidence suggests both extremes existed, with even modest people sometimes pooling resources for embalming. But one thing is clear: the obsession with death wasn't morbid, it was practical. In a land where life was uncertain, ensuring eternity was the ultimate insurance policy. The funeral procession finally reaches its end. Priests chant, incense smokes, and the wrapped body is lowered into the tomb. Families touch the earth in farewell, and you, outsider with modern eyes, realize how much effort, artistry, and belief was bound into one person's passage. You wonder who will one day dig here, centuries later, pulling back linen and gasping at how the flesh still clings to bone. You step back from the crowd, heart oddly heavy. For a moment you almost hope the gods weigh you gently too, despite your blunders. After all, you've jaywalked, complained, lied about being 5 minutes away, more times than you can count. Imagine those little sins piling up on a cosmic scale. Best not to think too hard. The procession disperses, and the desert swallows its silence again. You leave the mourners behind and follow the winding alleys back into the heart of the village. Evening has begun to creep across the Nile Valley, and with it comes a shift in rhythm. Smoke curls from clay ovens, the smell of bread baking drifts into the air, and children carry baskets piled high with vegetables pulled fresh from gardens just beyond the floodplain. For all the grand talk of gods, tombs, and eternity, daily life here turns on something simpler: food. The Egyptian diet, though thousands of years old, feels familiar in its basics. Bread is everywhere, dense, hearty loaves made from emmer wheat or barley, ground by hand between heavy stones that leave gritty fragments in the flour. Bite into one and your teeth would crunch not only the crust but tiny bits of sand. It's no wonder dental problems plagued these people, even the rich. To wash it down, there's beer. Not the golden, frothy kind you might imagine, but a thick, porridge-like brew, sometimes sweetened with dates or flavored with herbs. Beer isn't indulgence here, it's nutrition, a staple for adults, children, workers, even priests. In a sense, they eat their beer as much as drink it. On good days, meals expand. Fish pulled from the river, roasted goose or duck, perhaps cuts of beef or lamb for the wealthiest. But more often it's vegetables that dominate: onions, leeks, garlic, lentils, chickpeas. Add cucumbers or melons from fertile garden plots, and suddenly the table looks surprisingly colorful. You sit by a low table in your mind's eye, imagining yourself among them. Flat bread torn by hand, dipped into bowls of stewed beans. A clay pot of figs passed around, sticky with sweetness. Honey drizzled sparingly. It is precious, almost sacred, the food of the gods. Salted or dried fish to last through leaner seasons. And always beer. But preserving food in this heat is a battle. Without refrigeration, every family relies on drying, salting, smoking, or sealing in fat. The Nile's annual rhythm helps too. Fresh floods bring fertile soil, but also a cycle of planting, harvesting, and storing that structures life itself. Grain silos rise like monuments in their own right, for in Egypt, wealth and survival are counted not in gold, but in sacks of grain. At night, families gather outside to eat, the cooler air easing the day's heat. Oil lamps flicker, cats prowl near the edges of the courtyard hoping for scraps, and conversations drift from crop yields to gossip, from temple festivals to small complaints about neighbors. It is strangely comforting. For a moment, you forget you are in a world of pharaohs and pyramids. Instead, you sit cross-legged on the ground, sipping from a clay cup, realizing that this is the true pulse of Egypt. Not the monuments of stone, but the meals shared in shadowed courtyards. And you smile because, in a way, these people are not so different from you. They worry about their bread rising, they grumble about spoiled fish, they laugh when children spill their beer. Eternity might wait in the tomb, but life is tasted here, one bite at a time. Even after the evening meal, the village doesn't fall instantly into silence. Egypt, for all its stern temples and solemn hieroglyphs, loves its music, its games, and its laughter. You step into a small courtyard where the air is thick with warmth and the faint scent of roasted garlic, and already someone is plucking at the taut strings of a lute. The sound is soft and nasal, oddly soothing, like the hum of a cicada carried on a breeze. Children scurry about chasing each other, their bare feet slapping against dusty stone. They play games not so far from the ones you know today, tossing knucklebones like ancient dice, rolling hoops, or stacking tiny clay pieces in little contests of balance. You realize that no matter how many millennia separate you, the sound of a child's laughter is exactly the same. Adults are not left out. Board games have pride of place here, the most famous being Senet. Picture a narrow board with 30 squares, some marked with mysterious signs. Players slide small pegs or stones across it, guided by the throw of casting sticks. To them, this isn't just pastime. It's a mirror of the afterlife. Moving your piece through hazards and safe squares mimics the soul's journey past trials into eternity. Play badly, and maybe the gods are whispering your fate. But don't think it's all solemn divination. Egyptians also invent lighter games, ball games played with papyrus fiber balls, wrestling matches where boys lock arms and tumble in the sand, even boat races during festival days. When the Nile is calm, groups push little reed boats out just for fun, their voices carrying across the water in gleeful shouts. And then there's music. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear it. The pulse of hand drums, the delicate tinkle of sistra rattling with metal discs, the sharp call of double pipes. Some songs are hymns to gods, others cheeky love ballads sung at festivals, where lyrics tease and flirt. In temple processions, music amplifies the divine. In taverns, it lubricates the tongue. Music wraps itself around every mood, sacred and profane alike. Dancers whirl too, some professional entertainers, others simply villagers who let their limbs move with rhythm. The steps are measured, the hips sway, arms curl upward like lotus stems in water. Their shadows flicker on mud brick walls in the lamplight, making the whole scene shimmer like a mirage. You sit at the edge, watching, and a thought strikes you. Isn't it odd that a civilization so fixated on eternity spends so much energy on fleeting joy? Perhaps it isn't odd at all. Perhaps it's the balance. Eternity is a long time, far too long not to know the pleasure of a good tune, a game of senet, or the satisfaction of seeing your neighbor tumble in the sand during a playful wrestling bout. And if you think the pharaohs kept themselves too lofty for such pleasures, think again. Murals in their tombs show queens offering music to Hathor, nobles reclining while musicians pluck harps longer than a man is tall. Even the mighty wanted to carry their favorite games and instruments into the afterlife. Proof that entertainment was as essential as food, water, or faith. So you realize Egypt doesn't just demand reverence. It invites laughter, dancing, playful competition. And though the echoes fade into the night, you can still sense the rhythm in your bones, as though the Nile itself beats a drum beneath the earth. The Nile, for all its blessings, is not a gentle neighbor. By day you admire its shimmer. By night you hear its currents whisper like some vast animal breathing in the dark. And you remember, this river is both giver and taker. Every year it swells in flood, bringing black silt and life-giving water. But sometimes, the waters rise too high, swallowing fields, sweeping away homes, forcing people to cling to rooftops like shipwreck survivors. Other years, the flood is too meager, leaving cracked earth and withered crops. Imagine checking your calendar app today only to see possible famine. Please prepare. That's the sort of uncertainty an Egyptian farmer lived with. Then there are the creatures that call the Nile home. Crocodiles bask along the banks, jaws parted like sinister smiles. Step too close while filling a jar, and you might vanish beneath the surface before you can even scream. Hippos too, enormous and deceptively fast, thrash boats apart with tusks that gleam in moonlight. Ancient villagers feared them enough to carve charms and whisper prayers. And if you thought mosquitoes were bad at your last summer barbecue, try living with the swarms of flies that follow the river's humidity. Buzzing, biting, relentless. Disease lurks in this water too. Parasites sneak in when you bathe, fevers rise without warning. Bellies swell from strange ailments no ancient doctor can name. You'd think a splash in the Nile is refreshing, but it often comes with an invisible price tag. Illness that stalks you for weeks. Some mummies show evidence of schistosomiasis, a disease spread by snails in the water, leaving its victims weak and drained. Life here is no paradise, even with all the fertile fields. And don't forget the desert beyond. Step too far from the river's green edge and the land changes instantly. Sand stretches endless. Shimmering heat bends the horizon. Winds carve dunes into shifting walls. Get caught out there without water, and you're a candle in the sun, burning down to nothing. Caravans lose people this way, swallowed by silence. It's no wonder Egyptians revered the Nile as a boundary between life and death. It literally was. Storms sometimes sweep in, turning skies yellow, filling mouths and lungs with grit. Lightning cracks above temple pylons, sudden and terrifying in a land that otherwise feels eternal. Farmers look to the heavens with both awe and dread. The gods can bless, but they can just as easily remind you of your fragility. And still, people endure. They mark the floods. They build dikes. They whisper prayers to Sobuk, the crocodile god, hoping he'll keep his children away from their nets. They live with the risk as naturally as you live with traffic jams or flu season. But where you complain about rush hour, they complain about hippos sinking their fishing boats. It's humbling. The same river that grows your grain might one day take your life. And yet, Egyptians never fled from it. They stayed, adapted, even celebrated it. Because without the Nile, Egypt wouldn't exist. Without danger, there is no gift. That's the paradox you live with here. Survival means accepting that beauty and peril are braided together, like reeds along the riverbank. And now, as the night deepens, you find yourself walking slower, softer, as if even your breath doesn't want to disturb the ancient air. The Nile drifts quietly in the distance, its waters reflecting a silver thread beneath the stars. The day's heat has finally fallen away, and the desert cool spreads like a gentle blanket. You are weary, but in that sweet, heavy way, the kind of tired that invites rest. All around, the sounds soften. The chorus of frogs hums like a low lullaby, reeds whisper together in the faint breeze, and somewhere a heron lifts its wings, the quiet rush fading into silence. You sense how fragile your steps are in this landscape, how utterly dependent you've been on river, grain, sun, and gods. For a moment, you smile at the thought. You, with your modern shoes and clever phone, brought low by a fish-gut perfume or a hungry hippo. Maybe you laugh, maybe you sigh, but it doesn't matter now. Because here, in the dark, there is only the slow pulse of life, and you are part of it. Remember how it began, back when you stepped off into Egypt's dust with all your assumptions. You've walked through markets choked with flies, sweated under stone pyramids, felt the itch of parasites, and squinted against sandstorms that swallowed the horizon. You've tasted barley beer, endured priest ceremonies, feared crocodile jaws snapping in the night, and still, somehow, you've made it here. Just one more breath, one more night. The ancients knew something we often forget. Life is fragile, but it is also endlessly renewing. The floods return, the sun rises, the tombs endure, the stories last. And you, sitting quietly now, drifting at the edge of waking and dreaming, you carry their voices with you. Maybe you wouldn't last a day in their Egypt, but tonight, in the hush of your room, their Egypt lasts within you. So close your eyes. Let the river's rhythm carry you. The stars above are steady. The night is long, and you are safe here. Let your mind loosen, like a boat unmoored, rocking gently into sleep. You've traveled far enough. You've seen more than enough. And the rest belongs to dreams.